you have to consider the fact that because there's such a high volume of content out there, if your message isn't right, if you don't connect with intention to your audience, it will just be noise.
So you start with a true statement. And that's what brings people in, because the first thing they need to realize is that this is for me within the first few seconds, right? They've got to understand really quickly whether or not it's relevant for them and draw them in. So that time is really valuable.
It's not so much about the information. And honestly, nowadays, we all can pretty much find the same information if we want to find it. But what matters is the story we tell with that. Welcome to the first ever Between Pixels podcast. This is a podcast for anyone who wants to connect and reach their audience with content and marketing. My name's Josh, and I'm here with my business partner, Brian Frederick.
That's a hard C.
Frederick Owen.
I think my birth certificate might have a K, but I kind of removed it just because I'm not interested in it.
Hey, just quick, PSA announcement. If your name is Brian Owens and you get email that's for Brian Owen, make sure to send it to Brian Owen, because you get stuff for Brian Owens all the time, don't you?
And Brian, which is a totally different spelling. So
Brian's it's a complicated situation.
It is very, and then you got Ryan's in there too.
And you get probably
and Ryan's hate Brian's.
If you get stuff to Brain Owen.
I get, yes, which I take as a compliment.
Yeah.
I just assume.
That's what they called you back in the day.
Yeah, no, that certainly did not call me that back in the day.
your initials are BO, so it's not a great nickname.
No, you got to work really hard to work around that one. Lots of showers, deodorant, cologne, things like that. So yeah.
I love it.
But
so the podcast won't be mostly us just talking about how to make up nicknames for you.
No, unless people like that. And then
it will be other stuff.
Yeah.
So in the podcast, we hope to talk about lots of different things. We want to talk about some behind the scenes stuff of how we do things at BP. Today, we're going to talk about our story framework. But what are your thoughts on the podcast in general?
Yeah, I think it's really going to be hopefully focused to people who are in positions where they're creating content or using content to influence people to reach them. So that could be through advertising, through video production, things like that. Mm-hmm. But I do think we have been kind of wrestling with the name a little bit, because we could call it like the Between Pixels podcast, or maybe not have a name. But I kind of feel like as a marketer, like we need a name for it. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
It's really funny that you say that, because I did think it would be kind of funny if we named it Between Two Pixels podcast.
Is that trademarked? Like between two, I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of funny.
But that is amazing.
And between two ferns.
Because there's always going to be two.
The whole idea is like,
two.
if you can see this, like if you're listening to this, you obviously can't see the video set, but there's just two stools and in the studio with a high top, so it's pretty much always going to be two. So Between Two Pixels, I feel like is going to work, and it's kind of funny because we've been called so many things as a company. We are Between Pixels. We've been called Between the Pixels. We've been called Just Pixels. We've been called
Beyond Pixels.
Beyond Pixels. We've been called Pixels in the Sky one time. We were called that. Yeah. The Pixels.
Beneath Pixels. Yeah. The Pixels is a pretty common one. Yeah.
But
that's like a band, or close to a band.
Yeah. Between the Pixels happens a lot. So anyways, I think this is like going to confuse things even more. Welcome to the Between Two Pixels podcast.
I love it. Let's do it.
All right. So today's episode, we're going to talk about the story framework, or maybe the BP story framework, just to have clarity. So just to kind of set this up, this is the framework that we use to create content. Doesn't matter what kind of content it is, but also to develop entire marketing plans and social media plans and all of that stuff for clients.
Yeah.
So I think it'd be kind of fun to talk about how it came to be, and kind of for us where it came from, but also kind of how story became to become more elevated kind of in the discussions for agencies. Because this was in 2015, I think, is when we kind of started to talk about this more front facing. Mm-hmm. We always use it internally. Yeah. So let's take ourselves back in time to when you and I we're kind of rebranding Between Pixels as a story-driven marketing agency. So go with us back to 2015. All right.
I remember.
What was happening? What were we doing?
Well, I can potentially shed some from a outside position coming in at about that time. I feel like you had developed a reputation for video specifically because clients, you would create a video and then clients would realize like the production is great, but the superpower was helping them figure out how to actually communicate their story, right? Because a lot of organizations, you work with a lot of nonprofits back then and then kind of got in the corporate world, they understand their features and benefits, they understand their market, but they're so close to it that they can't, it's really hard to understand how to turn it into like a narrative that actually creates a real connection, right? And there's like an art to it. I think you guys at the time when we were just doing video, that's when clients realized it. And that's kind of when I think you started to realize this might be something, number one, we got to expand into marketing, but then realizing maybe that's something that needs to be solidified and codified a little bit into something that can be like repeatable and offered as part of what we do for content production, but also potentially just as an independent way to help organizations kind of figure out how to tell their story, right? So through workshops and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I saw it.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Right?
This was great. This is kind of like active listening. Like what I ask you what happened, you tell me, then I verify if you're correct.
Is that what happened?
That is what happened.
Okay, cool.
This is a work marriage is what we've got. Yeah. This is marriage
counseling.
Arranged. This is really just work marriage counseling. So exactly. When we started in end of 2011, we did a lot of nonprofit work at the beginning. And of course, like nonprofits are like, more messy to work with than corporate at times.
But they're also very focused on story. It's like their story is what matters.
Yeah. And I don't mean that in like a negative way. I just mean that they have like very strong convictions about what they're doing. Yeah. And so a lot of times they can get to them, the problem is just like a big ball of yarn that's all tangled up. And you come in, then they just start telling you all these like really for them very motivating facts and statistics about who they're serving and what they're doing. And it's like the need is what has driven them. But the need because like need doesn't drive everyone because it doesn't resonate. So what has to resonate is story. So then I guess, in a way, the stakes were a lot higher for the videos that we were creating at that time. We were getting hired to travel all around the world and create these like fundraising videos for these nonprofits. And they're like, this has to raise money. Right. We're paying you guys to do this. So we kind of backed into this story framework model because we started to dissect what works. And part of it was like, we had done this series of fundraising content. And then I was trying to figure out as the company was growing, how to scale it with our producers and how to be like, all right, how do I teach someone how to create a story like these other ones that were successful? So rather than like looking at all these other, because there are lots of story frameworks out there. If you can go and search, story frameworks, you can find the hero's journey. You can find like all these other things that other people use that do production. And that's fine. But I wanted to use something that I knew worked. And so I looked at our videos that we had created that were the most successful and figured out like, how can I teach this to my producers at the time? This was like in 2013 or 14 or so. So we kind of figured out this recipe and then when you and I started trying to make this shift into the marketing side of things, you were actually like, we need to have something that we present to clients front facing. Yeah. And I was like, oh, we actually do have that. It's just on this piece of paper that we give to producers in a pages document and then they fill it out when they do intakes with clients and when they write scripts. So then we were like, all right, let's take this and really brand it. And then we kind of started expanding it into more marketing related things and using it for all kinds of things. So we use it for writing a simple script. We use it for doing an intake or discovery. We've done like 4-hour workshops with clients where we unpack everything, we identify all their audiences, we break down all the groups and the columns of this framework and lay it all out. Now, how does that sound? Did I tell the truth there?
Yeah, that's generally correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So that's how the story framework came to be. And so let's talk a little bit about how it solves problems for our clients. So I talked a little bit about nonprofits. So maybe you could talk a little bit about the marketing side and how you've seen this work for those clients.
I think in general, it provides a level of clarity and purpose and intention around the messaging, right? Because for a client to create a message that resonates with people, it has to be different. And it has to even be structured in a way because they're exposed to so much information on a daily basis. So there's a stat that, on an average day, a person has 35,000 decisions to make, right? And the amount of content that people are exposed to is overwhelming. So if you don't have a really clear, concise way of kind of delivering your message and explaining what you do and why it matters, then you've got no shot, right, at building a relationship with them, right? They might be aware of you, but they're not going to move any closer to the end of the sales journey or the marketing journey. So we've seen it really help provide clarity at the brand level where, surprise that companies that have been around for a while have a lot of different messaging but people use it in different ways. And so we've been able to kind of, sometimes bringing that structure to it really helps people understand, like, how do we talk about ourselves, right? So we start with the truth statement. And that's what brings people in, because the first thing they need to realize is that this is for me within the first few seconds, right? Whether it's you're meeting someone in an elevator or at a restaurant or it's an email or a TV ad, right? They've got to understand really quickly whether or not it's relevant for them and draw them in. So that time is really valuable. So it really helps connect people that's what you need to figure out is what is the thing that someone's going to see that is or hear from you that's unique and makes them kind of nod their head and be like, yeah, I agree with that. Like that's my worldview, or I've been there, that kind of thing. Yep. So we've seen it provide a lot of clarity for that. And just the going through the process allows us to build out entire frameworks for their messaging that spans every channel, right? So you can take that model and then you can kind of apply it to every piece of content that's created. And so whether or not there's a marketing coordinator that just joins the organization or of another vendor you're using, they have a framework that they can then apply across everything. And it's going to be consistent, and that it's going to be using language and talking points and things that actually connect with people. Because not everything about your organization, people don't care about everything. But there's certain things that they care a lot about, right? And so you have to understand what's really deep in motivating behavior, right? And so that's what the story framework helps.
That's really good. I think it would be good, because I have so many things to add to that, but to talk a little bit about what the framework actually is, because you alluded to the truth. So this is what the framework is. So it's truth, problem, tension, solution, vision, invitation. So that's actually the framework right there. So the truth, as you said, it's the big picture, it's the wide angle view. So you kind of alluded to that a little bit. So it's the nodding your head in agreement, right? So so maybe we could talk about each one of these, because I think it's going to play in a big picture way of how we do this for marketing. Because I think it's really impactful to see it all out on a table, all out on a whiteboard, and then you start doing the card sorting exercise, and the things you were talking about, and like breaking that down. So just talking a little bit about, let's break that down. I think we can do it and discuss some of the details. So the truth statement, as you said, like especially for marketing, relates to your audience groups. So audience kind of sits outside of the story framework.
Right.
And I like to think about the framework like, so they always talk about marketing funnels, you know. It's like, where are you in the funnel? And you go through the funnel, and then they get different messages, based on where they're going and whatnot. So this is kind of like an emotional funnel. I like to think about it like that. I like to think about our audience going through it, and that the stuff at the bottom, this funnel gets narrower, so that like your message gets more narrow, because you're trying to make them take action at the end. And we say, like, we want to influence our audiences to act. That's kind of how we talk about it, right? So we see ourselves as providing a service of helping our clients gain influence with their audience. This was before influence marketing was a thing. I'm an influencer. That's not what we're talking about.
That's different.
So it's like almost become a bad word. Kind of like storytelling. It's like there was a time when it was like, oh my gosh, everyone's a storyteller. Okay, I get it. But no, story is really important. In fact, honestly, the stories that we tell, it's not so much about the information. I think that's one of the things that I've realized. The information is great. We all, and honestly, nowadays, we all can pretty much find the same information if we want to find it. We can all go read the same data, but what matters is the story we tell with that.
Right.
And I think we see in our culture that people tell different stories. And I'm not trying to be political, but I mean, just look around. It's about the story you tell yourself.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So anyways, so getting back to the story framework. So we've got the truth. So like you said, this is the wide angle view. I kind of like to talk about it like it's a lens you look through.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have these, like for videos, we have these like truth statements usually at the beginning to gain people's attention, and it should resonate with the audience. So we're like, every city has a beginning, or dieting is a lie. We start videos with these like powerful statements and people are like, ooh, I'm intrigued. This must be for me. But on the marketing side, I know that a lot of times, I mean, you can see this in anything. I mean, you can see it in ads, you can see it in design pieces or whatever that is. You see these big statements, but they all kind of relate back to the audience and what might grab them. Mm-hmm. So that's like truth. So problem. So like as we do this in our card sorting exercise, it's really fun to do it. We'll lay it all out with a client, have them write down all these different truth statements. We'll write down truth statements. And sometimes we don't necessarily do this in order, It's like, it's hard to be like, well, what are all the truth statements? And they're like, gosh, I don't know. It sometimes helps to do the second step first, which is write down all the problems or the pain points for the audience. So talk a little bit about that. Like how do we identify the problems and why is that important to do from a marketing perspective?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, identifying the problem and the tension sometimes go hand in hand. They're very connected, right? Yep. So the desire and the need to have a problem solved is pretty powerful, and that's sometimes literally what we need to do. Mm-hmm. But the first thing of that exercise is making sure that the problem is one that your customers, clients actually have, right? Yep. And it's the right problem to focus on. So a lot of the exercises, because usually clients can lay out, and we can lay out like just a laundry list of problems and solutions. That's the easiest part, right? Because they know what they offer. And then they can do a laundry list of problems. But a couple of things that come out of that is we help prioritize them and then map it back to the audience. So it's like, who is your most important audience? Mm-hmm. And then what are their problems? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you keep peeling it back and asking questions about like, well, why is that? Right. Keep asking that question, unpeel the onion, and all of a sudden you get to some of the root problems. Yep. So a lot of the exercises is not necessarily, it's getting a level deeper to the problems that really drive behavior, more so than kind of like the surfacey problems that are really easy to come up with. So even just the exercise of getting in a room together and working through that, I think is what helps uncover some of that stuff. And then realize like, why aren't they solving that? Which is the next part of the tension. But if these are the problems, then what are they? Why do they feel like? What are they feeling about? That's this anxiety, or what's driving the behavior to see a different version for the future, right?
And we often talk about that as saying like the psychographic versus the demographic.
Yeah.
So you're a woman who's 35 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, and you live here, great. But like, what are all these underlying motivators? Yeah. So what are your pain points? Like, what are the things you're motivated by and interested in, and like all of those things kind of go in. So yeah, to your point, this is that's why I like to think of it like a funnel. So it's like you can't get the truth and get in the funnel with this truth and then have a different problem that's not related to that truth that then connects to a solution that doesn't solve the problem. So it kind of works that way. So the next one is tension, and you kind of alluded to it, that it builds on it. So I like to think about the tension as it's the reason why the problem isn't solved, or it's kind of like this, it can be like a linchpin. So a lot of times for like fundraising content, this is like the aha moment, because everyone resonates with problems for fundraising. But when we say the tension part, they're like, oh wait, that's why. And then we share a solution that solves the tension. Mm-hmm. And so for marketing, how do you kind of see that tighten the screws? Because I think a lot of times, like, I mean, we've read and we've presented before when on this content, tension is the most important part of a narrative, and it's the thing that motivates people. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of thing that makes you like dig in and listen. So how do you see that play out on the marketing side?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some themes that come out when we start talking about tension. A lot of them end up being I can't solve the problem because I don't know who to trust, or I don't know where to go, or I'm overwhelmed by options. And so that's not their root problem, but it's the reason that the problem is not getting solved, right? So we start to see, once we start asking some of these leading questions, we realize there are common themes that kind of sit on top of those problems. And that's what we can really use to communicate with people. Because if you can address those things, if there's an issue where there's either too many options, or in the financial services market, for instance, there are certain industries that rely even more heavily on trust and trusted relationships. Those are often the ones where they might have a problem that is, I need to save more money, or I need to have a lawyer look at it, or whatever. That's great. But the tension is more that they don't know who to turn to, and they need to be reminded about who they can trust. So, so that's kind of where a lot of that stuff comes out. So sometimes you can map problem directly. Sometimes we'll just start asking things about, like, how is the client feeling, or how is the customer feeling right now? Like, what's their tension? Well, they're feeling anxious. Why are they feeling anxious? That's probably because there's some kind of tension there, right? It's not necessarily the problem that's causing anxiety. It's the fact that they can't get the problem solved, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, they're definitely related, but you can start unpacking those and digging deeper to figure out what is actually what's the emotion behind the change in behavior. And then, like you talked about, we basically deal in influence. So we try to figure out how you can communicate in a way that influences the perceptions of those people towards the solution, right? In the right way. So, yeah.
I love it. So, and the next one is vision. No, sorry. The next one is solution.
Right.
I was like, wait, we were saying solution so many times. And then I was like, okay, no. So problem, tension, solution. So like you kind of alluded to this, but like most people know what their solutions are. This one's easy. You can fill it out. Now, what can happen sometimes is that they realize they need to tweak stuff because they need to make their solution fix some of those real problems.
Yeah.
So it's helpful. So yeah, the solutions are pretty easy. Now, the thing I think in the corporate space is like that can end up being the driving thing. Oftentimes it's like the solutions are the thing they want to talk about the most.
Yeah, 100%. Go right to it.
Go right to the solutions. And I think we've got to what we do. So it's a little different than nonprofits. When we work with nonprofits for fundraising, it's here's my problems. In corporate, it's here's the solutions. And we have to say, what problem is this solving? And we have to start there and back up.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. But I would maybe, so we can kind of do solution and vision kind of maybe at the same time. But the vision is kind of like how your solution fits into the big picture. So it's what does this look like if the audience actually accepts the opportunity to buy or give or go or whatever action related thing, if they decide to take action. So that's kind of what the vision is. It's either how is your life better? How's the world going to be better? What's going to change? So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about our work with ALO on some of these two things, because I think this is one of the things that I feel like we've done so much for them, and just talk about why this is really important, because it's healthcare. Yeah. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you've seen this play out in their relationship.
For the solution and the vision?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or all of it really, but I mean, you could kind of talk a little bit, because I know we've done a lot in our work with them to go even just beyond just content creation, but even trying to kind of fix some of the stuff that is maybe a stigma in healthcare, and really help them provide like a better customer experience or patient experience and all that stuff. So,
there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, I think a couple things that come to mind is in healthcare, there are a ton of solutions, but sometimes the solutions are don't actually match the underlying client need. So, as an example, we did some research, and really in preparation for kind of like a relaunch to, number one, validate their business model, which was pretty well established, but then just to make sure like we really understood how to translate that to new markets and what really mattered. And so, we looked at, one of the solutions is obviously you have to have like quality healthcare, right? So quality healthcare is something that if you asked any executive in a healthcare company, you're going to be like, what do you guys offer? And they're like, we just create healthcare. You know what I mean? That's our solution. And it's like, awesome. But then when you ask the patients and the potential patients, like, what does quality mean to you? It's a totally different answer. So one of the things that the insights that we found was when we started digging into this question, we would ask people which factors are important. Quality was always number one or number two. But then once you start asking them, what does quality mean? We started to realize that they started talking about convenience, right? Or so they'd be like, I just need a doctor, or basic things like quality to me is a doctor that listens to me. And you're just like, okay, because quality, how a hospital system or a private care, they would define it as like outcomes, right? So I'm helping my people get better.
Yeah.
The patients, they're like, the solution I need is a doctor that listens to me. Because it's exhausting. Like, it's crazy.
I have to interject here because this like fits perfectly in line with our core values as a company: quality, consistency, and trust.
Yeah.
And what we say about quality is quality is not defined by us; it's defined by the client.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what you're saying. It's like the assumption is that quality means outcomes, and they're saying no, quality is experience. And I think that's really insightful.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the vision side for that in healthcare, so we're talking mostly like primary care. So the doctors that you have a personal relationship with and you work with a lot. So the vision, you could say, well, the vision for that is that I'm healthier than I've ever been. So it's more of a personal assessment and just the satisfaction and the ability to do those things. And that's important. But if you speak to families, the vision to be cast for them is that you don't have to worry about your healthcare, right? Yeah. It's convenient. It's always there. It's quality. You can see any doctor does locate. Like, it's not an issue. You've got enough on your plate, right? You've got kids to chase around, responsibilities at work. Like, relax. Yeah. We got this part taken care of, right? And so that's the vision where you have a partner where you don't have to worry about healthcare, because if something happens, you're going to be taken care of and you've got a partner, right? Mm-hmm. So that a lot of that kind of went into that, selling that vision of it fitting into your life more so than the traditional view, which is all about becoming personally more healthy, which is really important. But that's going to happen if you have a healthcare provider that's there with you, and you can get the care you need, you're going to get healthier, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's understanding that's the problem solution vision for that. We kind of flipped it a little bit. And that became kind of like the primary messaging, more about convenience and access and things like that. Of course, quality has to be there. Mm-hmm. That's a given, but that's not what's the big differentiation. It's more about the experience, right? Yep. So like if you go into a Ritz or something like that, you're expecting an experience. You might have a bed that's just as comfortable as another bed that's cost half as much to stay in, but you're expecting a level of experience, and that's kind of what you go away from. So
yeah. That's great. Yeah. Relax. It's ALO. I like, I've heard that tag
that
before.
Sounds good.
No, that's really good. Yeah, I think, on the fundraising side of things, the vision is really important, because usually it's something that makes you feel good when you give, hey, you're going to impact this person's life in this way.
Or imagine we talk with childhood cancer, like imagine that childhood cancer is eradicated in our lifetime. Yeah. That's a crazy vision.
That's a big vision.
Yeah.
And Cure childhood cancer is one of our clients. We've helped them, do fundraising content and different things for events. And it's always focusing on that. And it's another one of those things when there's always so many problems that they're facing that it's hard to focus on those vision things. And it can be sometimes hard for nonprofits to actually speak about their solutions, because I've worked with nonprofits before that have done great work. But I mean, if you're doing work as a nonprofit in a foreign country, it is really hard to be effective in foreign countries sometimes, because there's so many other NGOs working there. It's hard to have the resources. You have to have people living in the country. There's a lot of stuff that comes into play. And so a lot of times they are motivated by the problems, and their solutions can be a little bit inconsistent, I guess. And you got to try to figure out, how does this fit in? So we'll go through and like work with nonprofits and like work with them to figure out how to talk about their solutions in a different way, or even pulling them together and be like, all of these are about young women. All of these are about this group. We kind of like connect it. This is about meeting needs. This is about enabling upward mobility or whatever it is that we're talking about. And then, on the corporate side, I think it's become more interesting for folks on the corporate side to talk about the vision, because now if you can connect those solutions to some bigger thing, whether it's just for the client or if it's just for the company as a whole. I mean, I know we do a lot of work with Acuity Brands, which was started off as a lighting company. Of course, they've developed into so many more things. And now, as far as technology goes and just building management and all of that stuff in the green movement and all that there's a bigger narrative there. It's not just lights, it's energy consumption and smart buildings and like all of this stuff. And there's such a bigger story to tell. And that people are interested in that. Like, oh, okay, I feel good being a part. I feel good buying from you because you're doing all this other stuff. So I think that's really important. And then the last one is invitation. So simply put, this is the call to action. And I think the big thing we talk about on this front is that the call to action has to be appropriate. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about that from a marketing perspective, because I think with videos, it's obviously like, it's not that big of a deal. It's just a matter of getting it right and in the script. But maybe talk a little bit about that from a marketing perspective.
Yeah, to do that, I think we have to start at the very beginning, and we ask questions like, what at the end of this project, at the end of this campaign, at the end of this video, what do you want the audience to think, feel, do? Or like, what do you want? And in some cases, because I think we get caught up in marketing to be too action oriented, like I want them to click on something and buy. You know what I mean? And in reality, it's a much more complicated process. It might just be that you're trying to change their opinion about something. Like you're trying to raise awareness or educate them on the solution you have, because once they're more educated, then they can do something. So in that case, it could be just like a learn more, right? Which is hard to measure because you're not getting a conversion. So we kind of go all the way back to the beginning and what's the ultimate goal, and that'll drive the call to action, right? In some cases, it is a direct purchase or a micro conversion. We want them to take basically one step closer in their journey in our relationship with the customer. So that's what the call to action needs to be. And sometimes it's not an actual call to action or an invitation, like we want you to do this. It's just that the whole thing has to end. At the very end of it, you have to say, did this invite people to engage with us at any level deeper? And sometimes that might be a call this number, or it might be go to this website, or it could just be knowing that that's not appropriate for the stage of the marketing journey that you're in and you're communicating with people. And so the call to action can be a little bit more nuanced in the invitation, but it has to be included, right? In everything. So
that's one of the things that you can kind of feel, when you're getting ads shoved down your throat, on your phone, because content is I want to say content is everywhere, but we all know now that we consume more content than we ever have before. And kind of the way I like to think about why a story framework is important and why all of these things are important, the calls to action and how it's communicated, is because there's no lack of content. And I think the thing that nonprofits, corporations, anyone that's doing any piece of marketing or content, you have to consider the fact that because there's such a high volume of content out there that people are consuming, if this isn't right, if your message isn't right, if you don't know your audience, if you don't connect with intention to your audience, it will just be noise. I mean, the bottom line being, the way we use this is to connect our customers in a more intentional way to the audience to create influence and hopefully get them to do something and move forward.
Yeah, one more thought on the invitation piece that we come across is, I think I'm using we as a marketer too, because same thing with when we're talking to clients is often we try to ask for too much too early, and it's almost like the example of like dating and marriage. You don't walk up to somebody that you just meet and be like, hey, you want to get married? Like that's kind of what we do in marketing sometimes, is we'll do an ad that's really like brand awareness, and they don't really know anything about us, and we're like, hey, buy my stuff or something, and you're just like, hey, slow your roll, we're not there yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that's important to note, and also just that there's it's kind of unfortunate that the word story is used for like Disney movies, and it's also for like what we're talking about, because like they're the same word, but they're like completely different. I mean, they both connect in a certain way emotionally and have a lot of power, but I think sometimes when you hear like storytelling in business, it feels fluffy and almost like irrelevant, and it's not relevant to the business, but it is 100% about getting to the point that drives behavior and the empathy that it builds. Just like if you're watching a movie, it builds empathy. You can build empathy in the audience for your customers, and that changes the way they feel about you, whether they like you or not. And we know that people tend to like to buy or have a relationship with companies that they like. All of that comes from the story framework, and so from telling stories. So just to make sure it's clear that it is it's the same word, but it's a different kind of story that we're talking about. The other point was, I think it's easy to see how the story framework and all this can apply to like a nonprofit, because they've got really powerful stories. I mean, when you go to India and you're talking about kids that are abandoned, you know what I mean, and yep. which we've done, and it is really, it's not easy. It's just there is a story there. We just have to uncover it, right, and tell it, right. But there's been a couple examples, even in like B2B stuff, that you don't think has any relevance to storytelling. This process really works. So one example, there's a company we work with called Clyde Bergman. I don't know if you remember this project, mm-hmm. but so they have a really useful, interesting business, but one of those businesses that I didn't even know existed. So they work with pulp and paper mills. One of their services is, and they have this service that goes and they cleans all of their equipment. These are big devices that make paper.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of accidents. So if one of those things explodes or it's not kept up, it can cause fatalities. I mean, it's not common, but it can happen. It's a big problem. Yeah. But it also makes their plant run more efficiently, right? So there's like an ROI play. Mm-hmm. So when we started talking to them, we started unpacking this, and we were like, well, which is more relevant? And one camp was kind of like, well, we have to talk about the operational efficiency that you get, because you can get a return on your investment within 3 years of using this program. We're like, okay, that's great. When we started asking about who runs these and what happens when something bad happens, we started to realize that because of the risk of danger, we started asking about, well, who's in charge, right? And then you're like, well, there's a plant manager. And we're like, so the plant manager knows these people, right? They're like, oh yeah, they have great relationships. It's like family. These are small towns. Everybody knows each other. They go to church together. And so we're like, well, then the reason that person needs this program is because they don't want their friends to get injured, right? Mm-hmm. They don't want to walk in and see that they're one short a guy and they have to go to church or tell their family that their husband or wife is in the hospital because of this. We're like, that's what we have to go after, is really helping paint the picture that they're offering the peace of mind knowing that you're caring for your employees, and then they can make sure that their employees are safe and they're productive and they can live the lives that they want to live. ROI becomes much more secondary, right? So that's kind of how we unpack the story framework for that, to kind of set a vision for the people who are making the decisions in these plants. And then yes, you save money and all that stuff, so the CFO can be happy about it. But the real driver is about, I can keep my friends and my family safe so that they can go home after work, right? Mm-hmm. And do the things that they love to do. Yeah. So I thought it's sometimes in B2B, it's harder to see some of these things, but there's always an application.
Yep. No. So I love that. I heard a great quote today that I'll probably butcher it, but the difference between diamonds and dust is the process you use to get there. Mm. Think about that. Mm. Relates to storytelling.
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good intro to the story framework. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about in relationship to this?
It is something that is helpful for people who are kind of wrestling with either like video scripts or even startups who are like, I need to solidify my messaging and be real concise with it. You can kind of take our story framework and you can kind of go through it as like a self-service DIY kind of thing. Yeah. We'd encourage that. That's great. If it's helpful. There's also, we can help with that, but if you're working with somebody else, make sure that there is intentionality behind some structured process. It doesn't have to be our story framework, but it's got to be something. You have to hire someone that understands how to create messaging that connects and that has because otherwise you're just kind of hoping that they're like creative and smart enough to come up with the right messaging, and they just happen to stumble upon something. So part of the benefit, the reason that we like frameworks is because it provides some structure to give you confidence that you're like, even if you don't have the best ideas at the time, the process will lead you to a destination that gives you something that's really good, right? Mm-hmm. So you can take the story framework and you can apply it, and you can be confident that that is going to connect with people. Is there a better way to do it? Potentially, right? But at least it's better than doing nothing. So I think that's one of the benefits of having a framework, and we'll develop a lot of frameworks for clients that are around messaging and stuff like that, and it helps give like handholds, and consistency.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of plug our story workshop, or the card sorting exercise, a little bit, because like I said, we use it in lots of different ways. We use it for intake and discovery, and we use it for script writing. But another thing we will do is just do a story workshop with a client, bring them in, sit down, use cards. You write, one side it's got whichever part of the framework you're in, and you write it down, put them out on the board, sort them all out. It's so helpful to do the things you're talking about, because then in a marketing campaign, you can go, okay, for this audience, there's times, think about this, just thinking about ads that you see on TV. Maybe not you, but if you're listening to this somewhere, imagine a car ad. Does a car ad go truth, problem, tension, solution, vision, invitation? No, a car ad goes truth, vision, call to action. Invitation. They're like, think about, they're just like power.
Yeah.
And someone's whispering. And then they say
Matt McConaughey,
Hyundai Sonata,
right?
and then it ends, and then they tell you the price,
right.
And that's their call to action. Yeah. So, but it's always this like big kind of like, what is this like resonate? Because like, any cars are like, it's a microcosm of like the truth statement that resonates with the audience. And then you're basically just showing vision after that.
Yeah. Another example of that is, I think if you've seen the recent Land Rover commercials, right? And Land Rover is not necessarily a car that people buy because they want something practical, right? You can do everything you need to do on a normal day for 99.9% of the population without a Land Rover. But it's a beautiful car, and they paint this vision of a lifestyle and a capability that is attractive, right? So if you've seen the recent ones, there's one where they're in some Nordic country, and it's this stunt driver, and she's driving up, and like there's this water flowing. I don't even know where it is. I can't tell how fast the water's going. I can't tell how steep it is, but she's driving up this fjord, right? Like I guess it goes into a fjord, but it's like a manufactured river. And they had to create a way for the car to get down there. So they built a ramp to get down there. So it's not a place you can get to naturally. But if you happen to hire somebody to build a ramp to get down to there, you could drive up that in the water, right? With a helmet on and goggles, obviously, because that's what she had on.
Yeah.
And that was the commercial. And I'm like, that is so impractical, but it was interesting because I was like, I don't think my car can do that.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
And then they've got one where they've got all their models backing up to the edge of a cliff. And I don't know how they got on the cliff. Right. But that's the way they do it. It's like this vision for this life that seems amazing that doesn't even apply to anybody. And then of course it's like how much, it's like a $550 a month lease.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. They skip the entire process because they focus so much on setting this vision. And that it's like they're every car company is trying to one up themselves on how to create a vision that no one's ever going to live and get you to buy it, versus like a Subaru, which is all about like, my daughter's going off to college and this is the car that we've had in the family. It's like, it'll bring you to tears. But it's really interesting looking at the automotive is a great example of you can break down the story framework for automotive industry and see really clear examples of how they're using it.
Yeah. It's funny because as you're saying that, I talk a lot about how content, there's no shortage of great content out there. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be better at connecting the message with our audience, because quality content is a lot easier to produce than it used to be. This is why we can create ads that are compared to national ads at a fraction of the price. Shameless plug for our production services. But okay, so what you're talking about is really funny, because when I watch those ads, I'm like, this isn't for me, because I watch them and I'm like, obviously, who the heck wants to back their car off a cliff and do it with your friends? I don't even see a fire pit.
Yeah.
I don't see them doing anything there. They're literally just backing them there for no reason. Hey
Yeah.
guys, you want to go back your car off a cliff and almost die?
Well, and they can't get out because it's a cliff, so they would probably fall. So they're
Yeah.
just sitting in their cars, probably texting each other.
But this is
They're
the
like,
thing.
this is amazing.
That's not for me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like proves my point. I'm like, they're creating content that's for their audience because they know what is going to move their audience and inspire
But you're
them.
more practical. Like I see that and I'm like, that would be awesome.
Well, I know that.
Even though I would never do it, I'm like, that would be amazing. But then you think about the practicality of it and you're just like, yeah, but how are you going to get there? Like, do you have food?
I basically,
like, is there a place to go to the bathroom? Like, what
I have
do
a
you
Honda
do?
truck. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not for me.
It's like a minivan with an open back.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. It's a minivan where I don't have to get dirt in my minivan when I go to the dump.
Yeah. But why did you what connects? What about Honda's story connects with you?
Reliability.
Okay.
Yeah. So about personality and stuff. It's like, I just want dependability.
Yeah.
I don't need the adventure and the excitement and stuff. Yeah. I just know that I'm not going to need to get it fixed very often. It's going to have great gas mileage and it's comfortable, but it's not like the price compared to comfort is in balance.
Yeah. So the vision of a Land Rover, that idealistic lifestyle doesn't appeal to you as nearly as much, right? It's going to be more about the practical.
My Honda Ridgeline cannot go up those rocks.
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. It probably, I don't even know if you put the emergency brake on if it wouldn't slide backwards, but who knows? I don't know.
It's not really a truck, but it is a great car. Yeah. People love it. They buy it, but it has a trunk in the bed of the truck.
Yeah.
So you can open the back like a door and then open the trunk up and it doubles as a cooler, or you can put equipment in there. Yeah. You can put anything you want to keep cool, Tom.
But that's great because I think that show, oh, got it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Normally I'm pretty good at those. And so that's a great point. They know the Land Rover audience is a different audience, right? And obviously you talk about demographics and psychographics. They know that their audience can spend a certain amount, and so they have to position it a little bit differently, and the way they shoot it is a little bit different. All that stuff is different. But even what they're appealing to, like what problem they're solving, or the vision that they're casting for what your life is like if you have this automobile, is completely different. Just like we said, Subaru, right? Their ads are very relational about the trustworthiness and kind of like it being part of your family. And that's different and unique from Honda and Land Rover and all the other companies. So they understand their audience, and that's why it's important that you understand how to apply the framework to your audience specifically, because it really does matter. The answer of like what resonates with people is way more specific than it resonates with women between the ages of 35 and 55. Exactly. Like that doesn't help really much at all, right? That's not helpful. So
cool. Well, I feel good about this first chat and this first episode. I'm looking forward to doing more. I'm sure we could talk about the story framework for hours.
Yeah.
There's so many ways it's been applied, and I will say for people, if you're interested in it, you can. We used to have free downloads on our site. We at least have a free series on our site that explains how it works. You could do it by yourself. You don't, have to use us. I mean, we'd love to work with you if you want, but check it out, betweenpixels.com and see what we're all about, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the other final parting thought, and I could probably have a lot of parting thoughts. So you got to cut me off.
You need 3. Brian works in 3s.
I do, 3 buckets.
Do you have 3 parting thoughts?
I like 3 options. Well, there's 3 options for my parting thoughts. I'm going to choose bucket 2, which is to also to remember that while the story framework is structured and it is sequential for a reason, it doesn't have to be that sequence, which you kind of mentioned, and it doesn't have to be literal. So it's risky to say that, because then all of a sudden you get to the point where you're no longer using it because you're just taking it all apart. But if it does become, if you literally, like, you're doing a series of ads or communication, even if it's like to internal folks, and you take the story framework point by point and that's all you do, then it's going to lose its effectiveness. Do you know what I mean? It's not that structured where it should put you in a box, but it helps guide to identify like what you're missing. So you might make a decision to go from, like you said, truth to vision. Like, this connects with me. I'm setting a vision for the potential future, and then here's how we're going to get you there. So you might skip the problem intention.
Yeah.
Or you might reorder things a little bit. But so it's structured, but then once you start using it, then you can kind of deconstruct it a little bit and still have the same impact, because some deliveries, some channels really aren't meant, like you can't do the story framework in digital banner ads. You have to pick one.
Yep.
So sometimes we'll do a truth statement. We'll do a truth, or we'll do a problem, or we'll do a vision. That's pretty common, because you can really only say one thing. You can't unpack a story in a in a small banner ad.
But the cool thing the thing that's good about it is that you're going to do that for that piece of content. Well, like I was saying, it's like it's an emotional funnel. So then like, all right, they clicked, they end up in an actual funnel somewhere, and then you have a messaging strategy to deliver more content.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, so this person responds to this is their profile, and we have this whole other suite of like messaging that can go to them, and it's all connected. So I think that's great. So
yeah.
Well, cool. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up. We're trying to keep these to a timely fashion.
Less than 4 hours.
We're not going to go Rogan style. 6 hours.
We're not that important or knowledgeable. We're just 20, 30 minutes, I think, is probably good. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed this. And if you like this and, you want to hear more, then just wherever this ends up, go
back there.
Go back there.
I'm sure somewhere else.
I'm sure it'll be everywhere that stuff like this is. And then check us out on betweenpixels.com and follow us on social, and we'll see you later.